Hey guys, this is Infinity No What Ifs. I hope you are doing well. Please support to subscribe this channel to watching new interesting stories and to get all videos in real time. Please subscribe. So in this video, we will see second part what if Naruto unleashed new power trained by Tsunade. Here is short summary. During his preparing for the finals of the Chunin exams, the instructor his sensei assigned him was taken out by some weird man pepping in the Konoha hot springs. In a twist of fate, he was not trained by this man. Instead, a beautiful woman sends the man into the distance with a single strike. Seeing this, Naruto requests that this woman train him. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Cage versus a snake. As feathers began to fall around the arena, the cage turned toward the Hokage. Out from his sleeve, the cage pulled a large ball from his sleeve and threw it on the ground, unleashing a large cloud of smoke that obscured the vision of the occupants of the cage box. Immediately, the Hokage stood to his feet as his guard was impaled by several long kunai that went through his flak jacket and pushed him to the back wall. "Hokage-sama, leave, now," the man rasped out as he fell to his knees, then the ground on his side. Suddenly, the cage wrapped his left arm around the Hokage's neck and held a kunai to his temple. The cage dragged the Hokage to the roof of the cage box. Suddenly 4 Anbu, Zo, Baku, Taka, and Inu, arrived on the scene. Baku, Taka, and Inu were in black full-body cloaks and Zo is in a white full-body cloak. The cage's guards attempted to halt the Anbu, but Zo cut them down with 2 kunai as he shouted, "You will not interfere." The bisected bodies of the cage's guards fell to the roof with a thud. As soon as the bodies hit the floor, 4 individuals came out of the cloaks. The first that landed on the roof was a fair-skinned teen with straight, long dark blue hair that covered the left side of his face while leaving the right side exposed. He was wearing a dark green shade of lipstick as well as eyeliner. He was wearing a black shirt with a low collar under a brown tunic, which had a front and back apron that had long sleeves that were held down by 2 black vambraces. On the front apron was the taijutsu that was fully gray, rather than its usual black and white, which represented the unit he led for his master, the Sound 4. His tunic was secure with a thick purple rope belt, with the ends aiming up. Secured within his rope belt was a large scroll, though what its purpose was, is an unknown. He was wearing a maroon-red beaded necklace and skin-tight black shorts that stopped above his knees. He was also wearing black, Konoha-style shinobi sandals with calf-length leg warmers covered by bandages with a flare at the top reminiscent of loose cavalier boots. What made the teen really stand out was that he had a second head growing out of his neck that had an inverted hairstyle, meaning its left side was exposed. There was a single woman amongst the group. She was fair-skinned with a slender build, though she was rather short. She has brown eyes accented by her long eyelashes which complemented her usual impassive expression. She has waist-length dark pink hair with a bang that was chin-length while falling over her face. Like her colleague, she too was wearing low-collar black shirt under a brown tunic that had a front and back apron, though she had short sleeves, but she has the same black vambraces. On the front apron was the taijutsu that was fully gray, representing that she was a member of the Sound 4. Her tunic was also secured with a thick purple rope belt, with its ends aimed upwards. She was also wearing black, Konoha-style shinobi sandals with calf-length leg warmers covered by bandages with a flare at the top reminiscent of loose cavalier boots as well as skin-tight, black knee-length shorts. On her head was a black beanie with 3 small pipes that ran along the top of the hat while bandages were wrapped around it. The next was a dark-skinned teen who has his shaggy, black hair tied into a high ponytail. He was slightly taller than the 2-headed teen. His most standout feature was the 6 arms he has, each of which have a black vambrace of their own. He wore a sleeveless, low-collar, black shirt under a sleeveless tunic that was gray rather than brown with a V-neck cut in the collar. It still had the front and back aprons as well as the gray taijutsu. His tunic was also secured by a thick, purple rope belt with the ends pointing up. He was also wearing skin-tight black shorts that stopped halfway down his upper leg as well as black, Konoha-style shinobi sandals with calf-length leg warmers covered by bandages with a flare at the top reminiscent of loose cavalier boots. The final person to land was a tall but portly teen with orange hair cut into 3 lines reminiscent of mohawks, one down the center and one on each side of his head. He has fair skin and narrow, slanted orange eyes. Unlike his colleagues, he wore no undershirt beneath his beige, sleeveless tunic that has the front and back aprons and the taijutsu on the front apron. He wore loose-fitting black pants that fell halfway down his shins, a necklace that was comprised of many, thin, metallic rods with a red bead separating each rod, and a set of black vambraces. He too was wearing black, Konoha-style shinobi sandals with calf-length leg warmers covered by bandages with a flare at the top reminiscent of loose cavalier boots. They took up positions around the 2 cages in a rectangular formation that encompassed most of the roof they were on. As soon as they got into position, they went through several hand seal. Acting quickly, the 4 Anbu rushed to not be separated from Hiruzen. As they approached, the teens shouted, "Shishian Jin." As they stuck their arms out, a violet-purple rectangle began to form around the 2 cage, using the 4 teens as the corners to the bottom face of the rectangle. This did not stop the Anbu as they managed to make it inside the barrier before it was fully formed. "TCH. They got in," said the one with 2 heads. The cage stared down the 4 Anbu, but no expression could be determined due to the veil that covered his face. Despite having a kunai pointed at his temple, Hiruzen spoke. "I never imagined Suna would betray Konoha. Treaties are nothing but a smokescreen best used to lull the other party into feeling secure until you are ready to strike. But now this pitiful competition is over. From here, history will be made by the victor." Hiruzen was shocked by Rasa's words. "Are you starting a war?" "Yes," responded Rasa in a gleeful tone. In a panic-laced tone, "Let us avoid this needless violence and reach an accord through negotiation, Kazukage-sama. There is still time to avoid needless death." At those words the cage let out a chuckle. "Old age has slowed your mind, Sarutobi-sensei." At the title the cage used to address him, Hiruzen's eyes went wide. Silence enveloped the two. This allowed them to see the conflict that happened in the center of the arena. "I guess Jinchuriki are only useful when they control their Biju," commented the cage. This was the final piece that Hiruzen needed. He now for sure knew the person with a kunai to his neck was not Rasa. "So that's what this is about. Manipulating others to do a deed you wish. You have changed. And your foolishness has stagnated Konoha, so I shall be victorious," retorted the cage. "Humph. Nothing is decided until the very end. I taught you that all those years ago, didn't I?" As Hiruzen was talking, the cage grabbed his face, Orochimaru. He finished as the man tore his face off, putting Anbu more on guard. Orochimaru was a disturbingly pale man with golden eyes that contained a unique slit pupil. Around his eyes and down his nose was purple eyeshadow that was rather reminiscent of snake fangs that could be considered birthmarks as he had them even as a child. He has waist-length black hair that framed his face as his bangs curved across his face, as well as blue, sharp tomo earrings that were hidden beneath his hair. Hiruzen let out a sigh. "I knew this day would come, but I won't die easy," he replied with fire in his voice. "You should have named another successor, because as our guests will soon bear witness to the death of the Sandaime," said Orochimaru as he licked the blade of his kunai. For a while nothing was happening. Suddenly the kunai in Orochimaru's hand began to move. As soon as they noticed, the Anbu closed the gap between them and Orochimaru to save their Hokage. Then the kunai was embedded in Orochimaru's palm. He then let Hiruzen go and walked away, confusing the Anbu. As soon as Orochimaru was a few paces away, the Anbu took up a loose box formation around Hiruzen. As Orochimaru was walking away, Hiruzen asked, "Do you process some kind of regret towards killing me?" "No, I was feeling a bit sleepy. I just wanted to make sure that I am awake for this," Orochimaru said with glee as he turned to face Hiruzen. This was a sign to the Hokage and the Anbu that the fight they were anticipating was about to start, so Hiruzen removed his cage robes. Under his Hokage robes, Hiruzen was wearing a black body suit with mesh armor showing over his lower legs and forearms. He has a mute, green gauntlet over his right arm. He has a helmet with plated armor that fell to his shoulders in the same green as his gauntlet. Over his helmet, he has a bandana-style Hittite with its ties being long enough to drag on the floor, even at his full height. On the back was a piece of armor that was bolted to the bodysuit at the shoulders, which had the kanji for Sandaime Hokage. Placed over the armor were 2 shuriken holsters on his back. He had open-topped sandals that were held up by a strap around his ankle with an additional strap that went over his toes. Underneath the Kage's robes, Orochimaru was wearing his usual khaki tunic that fell to his mid-shin with slits running up to his waist. He has a black, skin-tight high collar that was layered over his tunic as well as black long-sleeve shirt underneath. He has gray, pocketless pants with his lower shins wrapped in bandages, black Konoha-style sandals and a thick purple rope belt. "It looks like they are about to start," commented the 6-armed shinobi. "Put a barrier on the inside," commanded the 2-headed one. At his orders, the 4 Oto shinobi protected themselves with an additional barrier reminiscent of the first they cast. "Originally I was hoping that no one would interfere, but you are going to die all the same," taunted the Hubby Sannin. Soon the surrounding air became weighted down by the pressure coming from the Hubby Sannin and the Hokage. With no signal needed, the combatants rushed forward to begin the battle. Hiruzen made the opening move. From a shuriken holster on his back, Hiruzen threw a shuriken at his wayward student. Going through a few hand seals, Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He called. As the shuriken flew, they multiplied from the single, original shuriken to 80. As the shuriken flew towards their target, Orochimaru went through his own hand seals. He suddenly clapped both of his hands together, Kuchiyos, Edo Tensai. At his words, caskets began to rise from roof. As the second coffin was rising, the Anbu disrupted Orochimaru's jutsu by throwing a few kunai that the captain caught as they missed their target. He used the thrown kunai as melee weapons, slashing at Orochimaru, forcing the Hubby Sannin to leap away or risk getting slain. This also cancelled the rest of Orochimaru's jutsu, leaving just the 2 caskets that managed to rise from the Edo Tensai. Seeing what was written on the caskets, Hiruzen shouted, "Get back!" The Anbu followed the orders of their Kage, once again taking positions around Hiruzen. Orochimaru stepped up to the caskets as they fell open, revealing their occupants, the Shodai and Nadaime Hokage. Hiruzen was disturbed. Orochimaru used a jutsu the Nadaime created to bring his mentors back from the pure world, also they could be used to fulfill his ambition of killing him. Hashirama Senju, the Shodai Hokage, was a tall man with tan skin and dark eyes that complemented his waist-length black hair that has a center part with 2 fringes framing his face due to his Hittite holding back his side bangs. He was wearing a black bodysuit under dark red armor that has the pauldrons and tassets that fell to the side of his legs, built from numerous plates that hung from the cuirass. On his pauldrons was the Senju clan symbol. He has his lower shins wrapped in white bandages while having open sandals that were secured by a strap that went around his ankles. Tobirama Senju, the Nadaime Hokage, was nearly as tall as his brother, the Shodai, but he has fair skin with shaggy, silver hair. He has 3 red marks on his face, 1 under each eye and 1 on his chin. He has black eyes like Hashirama and wears a similar outfit, the differences being his armor is blue with a white fur collar and his tassets fell over his front and back. Under his pauldrons were a set of rear braces while in place of the traditional Hittite is a hapuri. He has his lower shins wrapped in white bandages while having open sandals that were secured by a strap that went around his ankles. The 2 deceased Hokage took in their surroundings as their zombie-like forms slowly moved out of their casket, which fell to the roof as the 2 Hokage vacated them. The first to speak was Tobirama. The Edo Tensai and that pale one is the one who summoned a CH. So we have to fight? Questioned the Shodai. With the caskets now fallen to the side, Orochimaru stepped up to the 2 deceased Hokage with 2 kunai that had red seal tags tied to the rings on the handles. "We are sorry for troubling you, Sarutobi," said a sad Hashirama. "Let's get started," commented Orochimaru as he inserted the seal tags into the heads of the deceased Hokage. Soon their zombie-like bodies began to release smoke as their forms began to turn back to that of their physical prime. Their eyes then became white and unfocused while the sclera becoming pitch black. As the older Kages seemed to regain their forms, mocking the dead. "Nothing good ever comes from messing with the past," chastised Hiruzen. Once their forms had finished becoming rejuvenated, Hiruzen gave an order to his Anbu. "Follow my lead, Kaden." Karyuenden. The Anbu followed suit, mixing their flames in a futon, Repusho to empower the fire wave. In response, the Nadaime released his own jutsu with a single-hand seal, Sweden, Sujinheki. The Nadaime spewed forth a massive amount of water that formed into a barrier that stopped the wave of fire and blanketed the area in a cloud of steam. Hiruzen and his Anbu immediately went on guard. It was known that the Nadaime was a sensor nin and had a unique method of utilizing this ability. Suddenly a new jutsu was called from the steam. Sweden. Sushoha. The steam was condensed a massive vortex of water that shot towards Hiruzen and the Anbu. Acting quickly, Hiruzen and one of the Anbu went through a series of seals allow for another jutsu. Doden. Doryuheki. The two shouted in unison. The two coughed up a copious amount of mud, forming a wall that was nearly as tall as the barrier they were in. Sadly, the wall did not stop water, merely diverting it. To stay safe until the water became inert, the five jumped to the wall and used their chakra to stick to it. The five were not idle, however. They used the cover of the wall to position themselves for a surprise attack. They unleashed another Doden jutsu, Doden Ganchuso, which spawned several spikes around Orochimaru and the revived cage to skewer them. The Shodai acted quickly and used one of his own jutsu that stopped the reinforced spike, showing everyone the power of one of the world's strongest Kekkei Genkei. During this time, Hiruzen performed a jutsu of his own. Kuchio's no jutsu. Enma. Enma is a white-furred monkey that stood taller than Hiruzen himself. He has a mane of long hair that falls from his head to his tail with sideburns that reach past his chin and a goatee of near equal length. He wears a black body suit that stops at the elbows and knees, revealing he was wearing a full body suit of mesh armor. Over his body suit he was wearing a sleeveless kimono shirt that was orange with black stripes. Across the collar, waist, and cut-off points of the sleeves were white fur, though they were a darker shade than his fur. The shirt was held closed by a maroon-red sash, while a Konoha Hitai-8 was secured on his forehead. Taking in his surroundings, Enma was confused. "Hiruzen, what is going on?" Enma asked. "Orochimaru has invaded Konoha with the help of Suna. He has revived Hashirama-sama and Tobarama-sama. Tisk. Sad Sarutobi, all because you failed to kill him that day," replied a ticked-off Enma. With a sigh, Hiruzen responded, "I'm getting to it." "Enma, you need to become the Vajra Nyoi," said Hiruzen. With annoyance in his tone, Enma answered his longtime friend. "Fine henge. Kongo Nyoi," shouted Enma. Enma transformed into a black staff with yellow end caps that was half as wide as Hiruzen while being said to be as hard as diamonds and heavy to wield. The staff has the ability to change its width and length at Enma's will, however his mass never seemed to change. Hiruzen came out from behind the wall and stared down the protective dome the Shodai had created. The Anbu had also waited patiently for the Shodai to release his jutsu, but stayed at a respectable difference to not get hit by a sneak attack. Seeing the staff in his sensei's hands once the dome fell, Orochimaru brought out his own weapon by regurgitating a snake that then regurgitated Orochimaru's sword known as the Kusanagi. The sword has a black blade with a silver edge. It has a gold-looking handguard and holding plates, while the handle was white wrapped in black cord wrap held together by a gold pommel. The sword was said to be able to cut through nearly anything while being able to extend to any length, though the wielder needed to be careful as its mass increased with its length. Hiruzen stood before Orochimaru with Enma in his hands. "Take care of the pests, and when you are done slay the old man," ordered Orochimaru. The two cages said nothing as they launched themselves at the Anbu. Not deterred by their foes, the Anbu charged at the two Hokage to aid the Sandaime by removing this threat. Hiruzen got into a ready stance, holding most of the staff forward like spear, his knees slightly bent and his feet spread wider than his shoulders, with most of his body aimed away from Orochimaru, creating a harder profile to hit. Orochimaru took up a neutral Kenjutsu stance. He has his feet staggered at shoulder width with his arms relaxed and fully extended at his hips, with the blade angled toward his Hiruzen as he moved. Despite the ensuing combat of the Anbu and Hokage going on around them, the two seemed to be isolated in their own world as they stared each other down. Hiruzen struck first, thrusting his staff forward toward Orochimaru's chest. Using the flat side of his blade, Orochimaru deflected the blow but did his best to keep his blade in contact with the staff to close the distance between the two fighters. Knowing his former student's plan, Hiruzen performed a quick flourish with a back step, breaking the contact of the two weapons. Once again Orochimaru was on the defensive as Hiruzen aimed another strike toward Orochimaru's midsection. Orochimaru was once again forced to deflect the strike with the flat of his blade. As Hiruzen struck out, he began stepping forward. With every few strikes Orochimaru was forced to step back, else he could be struck by the weapon. Seeing he was getting nowhere quickly, Orochimaru jumped back to not be in range of Hiruzen's staff. As soon as he did, the staff's length shot out to pursue him. Ducking low, Orochimaru brought his blade horizontally over his head as the staff nearly stuck him. Taking advantage of his current position, Orochimaru rushed forward, keeping his blade in contact with the staff. Seeing what was happening, Enma quickly tried to become his normal size again. Enma returned back to Hiruzen too late, forcing the Sandaime to change his stance and choke up on the staff to use both ends to fend off Orochimaru. Orochimaru lashed out with a strong horizontal slash that was blocked with the staff being held perpendicular to the ground. From there, Hiruzen brought the staff down hard. Sadly for the Hokage and his partner, the strike was dodged. However, it was followed up with a thrust and the staff being rotated to strike with the back side. Orochimaru was forced to dodge each of these strikes as he overextended his weapon away from his body with the heavy strike earlier. Once again, the two were at weapon's length from each other. Orochimaru raised his weapon to strike for a right cross strike. As he brought his weapon down, he used the Kusanagi's special ability. The blade of the weapon extended to near equal length of Enma's staff form. As the blade extended, so did its mass, allowing the blade to strike with more force. Hiruzen used Enma to push the blade to the side, going as far as to hop away to the side from his current position. As soon as he touched down, Hiruzen had the staff extend once again. Orochimaru was still recalling the blade to its original length, so he was forced to block with his arms up. The blade slanted down. Sadly, this gave Enma and Hiruzen the advantage. Out from the sides of the staff came Enma's arms, however they were upside down. They latched on Orochimaru's wrists, preventing him from moving, as his head and neck came out from the bottom of the blocked staff, where he used his fangs to bite into Orochimaru's throat and rip his windpipe out. Orochimaru dropped his sword, which clanged to the roof, so he could cover his throat with his pale hands. Enma once again reformed to his normal length as he and Hiruzen watched Orochimaru fall to his knees. To the surprise of both the Monkey King and the Sandaime, Orochimaru's eyes rolled to the back of his head. His mouth opened wide and two pale hands grabbed the upper and lower sections of his jaw and forced them apart. The two nearly vomited as they watched another Orochimaru climbed out of covered in slime. The new Orochimaru bent down and retrieved his sword and took in his foe's disgusted expressions. "What do you think, sensei? It's a new jutsu I developed when someone manages to maim me in a way I deem disadvantageous," explained Orochimaru. Despite the silence, the two were stunned too. Enma broke from his stupor first. "That's just vile," commented the Monkey King. Soon a light amount of steam came into the area while water seemed to wash across their feet. The two applied chakra to the bottom of their feet, raising them out of the water. The two once again clashed weapons as Hiruzen thrust his staff forward, which Orochimaru once again deflected to the side. Taking advantage of the deflection, Hiruzen performed another flourish, but instead of another thrust, Hiruzen went for a downward strike. Orochimaru brought the Kusanagi up for a horizontal block. As soon as the weapons collided, Orochimaru allowed the staff to push his blade down, sliding the staff off. This allowed him to use the force of the strike to aid in swinging his sword up by rotating his wrist for the strike as he extended his blade. Hiruzen was forced to jump back lest he lose an arm to the sword. While he managed to not lose his arm to the strike, Orochimaru drew Hiruzen's blood by cutting a sizable gash up Hiruzen's chest. Orochimaru rushed forward so strike down the weakened Hiruzen. However, the old Hokage wasn't done yet. Hiruzen used his bad arm as brace before extending the staff once again. Orochimaru dodged the strike but was blindsided by the straight punch that Enma delivered before Orochimaru passed the staff. The strike disorientated the hubby Sannin, so he didn't see the staff being swung towards him, that sent him flying towards the wall of the barrier. Reacting quickly, Orochimaru used the Tsunade Jashu to grab onto the roof to halt his flight. He then rushed his former sensei as soon as he touched the roof. Before he was close enough to use the kusanagi at its standard length, he extended the blade to slash with a left-sided, diagonal strike. Hiruzen leapt back and swung Enma into the blade, batting it to the side. Hiruzen extended Enma once again to strike his former student. Orochimaru brought the handle of his sword up to his chin, rotating the blade towards the sky as the blade retracts. Enma collided with the side of blade with a loud clang. Acting quickly, the Hubby Sanin rotated his sword where the guard met the staff to put his blade over it to prevent a follow-up strike as he rushed forward. With his shoulder injured like it is, Hiruzen was unable to perform a flourish strike. His next best action was to bring the staff up similar to how Orochimaru did as Enma returned to his standard length. This allowed him to strike out towards Orochimaru's feet to keep him back. Once again, the two were back at a stalemate and forced to take neutral stances so save energy for their next clash. Before their confrontation could continue, the Anbu captain landed next to Hiruzen though he seemed to be missing an arm while the previous two Hokage soon followed. Hiruzen quickly batted the incoming Hokage away forcing them to Orochimaru's side. Above the Sandaime and the Hubby Sanin the Anbu and Hokage began their clash. The Anbu brandished dual kunai while the Shodai kept to his bare fists, encasing the appendage in chakra while the Nadaime called a discarded kunai to his hand. The sounds of clashing metal rang out over the confined rooftop. The force of the collision made the four combatants separate with the Anbu landing back on the wall while the Hokage landed close to its base. Wasting no time, three of the Anbu rushed forward while Taka remained on the wall. Taka used the basics of Doden manipulation to drop chunks of the wall where the Sandaime and the Anbu created the large structure. Zou led his subordinates into the fray, using Doden chakra to reinforce his kunai against his foe. Inu followed his captain's lead with the Doden chakra as Baku channeled lightning through his own. Once he dropped a significant amount of earth from the wall, Taka rushed to join his comrades, channeling Futon chakra through his kunai. Zou clashed with Shodai's fists as the Nadaime attempted to fly over his brother and stab the captain in the head. Trusting his comrades, Zou didn't shift his attention. His trust was well met as the Nadaime's attack was stopped by Inu as one of his empowered kunai deflected the Nadaime's while his second found its home in the Nadaime's head. Instead of the usual blood, slips of paper were ejected from the wound as the former Kage's body fell to the ground. Baku followed suit, attempting to skewer the Shodai only for the former Kage to push off the captain's kunai, elbowing the Anbu in the chest that attempted to stab his head before landing next to his brother. As Taka charged down the wall, he noticed the paper slips from the fallen Nadaime recollect at the Nadaime's head. Sensing the incoming issue, Taka replaced on of his current kunai with one with an explosive tag wrapped around its handle. "Tag out," he shouted to let his fellow Anbu know of the live explosive. The three Anbu retreated to Taka's position, landing on the wall as the explosion went off. The explosion wasn't that large, however it would definitely kill someone that was caught in the center of the blast. Despite the smoke, the Anbu remained vigilant. Before the smoke cleared, the Nadaime charged from the smoke appearing as if he had taken no damage. As the Nadaime charged, the Shodai leapt high into the air to perform a pincer of their own. The Anbu wasted no time reacting. Zou let loose a Kato, Gokaku no Jutsu at the airborne Hashirama. This was responded to by a Suiden, Taihoden let loose by Hashirama that drowned out the fireball. This resulted in minor flooding in the area and releasing a light amount of steam into the air. As soon as the jutsu were released, the remaining Anbu sprang into action with Inu moving forward to intercept the Nadaime if he gets any closer while Baku leapt up to reinforce his captain. Taka let out a Raiden, Sandabaruto at the Nadaime. Though most of the technique was dodged, its use of targeting multiple foes was used to successfully strike the Nadaime as he weaved around most of the bolts, forcing him back to the wall's base. The Nadaime was taken out of commission for the time being, which allowed the Anbu to focus on the Shodai. In response, Hashirama threw out Mokuden, Sashiki no Jutsu. The small branches flew towards the Anbu at incredible speed, forcing them to dodge. Sadly, Baku was not able to dodge entirely. A branch struck his left leg, where it exploded into multiple spears that went through not only his leg but also pierced his abdomen. The combination of the impalement and the fall from his position on the wall lead to him being taken out of the fight. Despite the loss of their comrade, the Anbu remained vigilant. The Nadaime released his own jutsu that went unnoticed by the Anbu until its casting. While running up the remaining earth wall, he unleashed Doden Tsuchinami no Jutsu, further destabilizing the wall as many waves have passed through the earthen structure. The Anbu shifted their attention to their footing to make sure they didn't fall, though this left an opening that the zombie cage took advantage of this by striking out at the distracted Anbu. The Anbu fell victim to one of the truths of the shinobi world. A single distraction could cost you your life. The Shodai struck the destabilized wall, breaking it into several large pieces. Zo and Taka were able to escape unharmed. Sadly, Inu fell to a stab from Tobarama, who imbued the kunai he retrieved with Raton chakra to make sure it went through his target. The two remaining Anbu landed on the ground only to be beset on by the Senju brothers, who each let loose a hard punch that smashed the two Anbu into the ground. Once the impact was made, the two Anbu were revealed to be nothing but piles of mud. Before the zombie duo reacted, the Anbu quickly stabbed two explosive tags into the Senju brothers. However, let it be said that the two were not inexperienced. Even in their weakened state, the brothers knew what to do. As the kunai struck, they had thrown themselves into the strike, allowing the kunai to travel through them, and grabbed a hold of the Anbu's arms. The tags went off, turning both of the revived cages to paper slips once more. The explosion nearly killed both Anbu, however they were able to substitute once more with the mud available, but at a cost. Taka had taken a lot of the concussive force as well as the cauterization of the stump that once held the explosive tag, while Captain Zo merely lost his arm. Seeing no other solution and to keep his semi-living comrade safe, Zo regrouped with his Hokage, the Senju brothers pursuing him. "I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. My squad and I were unable to defeat them," apologized Zo. Hiruzen could only look to his Anbu with regret and self-loathing. If he had stopped Orochimaru before he fled the village, then 3 more of his shinobi would not be dead due to his inaction. "Well, what will you do now, Sarutobi-sensei? Your Anbu are gone save one. You don't think you can protect him and defeat us, do you?" taunted Orochimaru. Hiruzen took in a deep breath, resigning himself to the fact he will fall this day to stop this threat to his home. Believing his Hokage's hesitancy to be related to his inability to fight, "Do not worry about me, Hokage-sama. Your safety is our priority. If you must let me fall to defeat those in front of us, do not hesitate to do so," commented Zo. Hiruzen looked to his remaining Anbu out of the corner of his eye. It was against those of Konoha to sacrifice their comrades, and Hiruzen decided to remind his Anbu of that. "We are Konoha shinobi. We do not sacrifice our comrades," boasted Hiruzen as he set down Enma. Hiruzen went through several signs that no one alive was familiar with after creating 2 cage buncheons. "Zo, I ask you to help me one last time." Zo was hesitant but not at all the same. "Of course, Hokage-sama." At these words, Zo retrieved one more kunai from under his coat as he prepared to give his life for his Hokage. Suddenly a cold feeling blanketed the area, but not one of low temperature. Instead, it felt like the shadow of death was near, and it affected everyone, including the dead. What none could see, aside from Hiruzen himself, was the spectral form of the Shinigami. The Shinigami is a translucent specter with the visage of a demon that towered over any human. It has long, shaggy white hair which has 2 red horns that sprung out from its forehead and purple-hued skin complemented by long sharp teeth. It was clad in a white kimono with a set of prayer beads in its right arm. Within its teeth was an unsheathed tanto which it held by the handle, which also hid its long serpentine tongue. When the being first appeared, its arms were spread wide as it held the sleeves of its kimono. Held on the deity's chest was the Sandame's soul. The Shinigami then performed a ceremony where it allowed its prayer beads to loosely wrap around its right arm that was painstakingly slow. As the beads fell down its arm, markings crawled down its arm. Orochimaru was getting impatient. "What did you do, Sarutobi-sensei? He performed a set of seals, yet nothing has yet to happen. What is his jutsu?" thought Orochimaru. Zo was thinking the same thing as the traitorous Sanin. He was unsure of what his Hokage was doing but kept his faith all the same. Tired of waiting, Orochimaru had Hashirama cast one of the most powerful illusions ever created, Kokuongyo no Jutsu. A blanket of darkness covered the roof, denying sight to Hiruzen, his bunshins, and Zou, who managed to get in front of Hiruzen before his vision was restricted. Sadly, Hiruzen was forced to keep his hands clapped together, so he was unable to retrieve Enma. Within the darkness, Orochimaru struck out at Hiruzen, however Enma would retake his normal form and disarm the Hubby Sannin by having the blade fly towards Hiruzen. He used his sense of smell and acute hearing to get around the blinding effects. He was soon bounded for his effort by the Tsunade Jushu, which had him fall at the Sannin's feet. It was then that Hiruzen moved. He rushed forward and managed to find his targets with the aid of Enma shouting out their locations. Orochimaru didn't bother to stop the Monkey King as he wanted to see what his former sensei's jutsu did. Hiruzen, and by extension, his bunshins, grabbed onto the collar of the zombified Hokage as well as Orochimaru. "Now!" shouted the Sandame. At his word, the Shinigami sent its bead-wrapped arm through the Sandame's soul and grabbed the souls of Hashirama and Tobirama. Once it had a firm grasp on their souls, the Shinigami began to drag their souls from their bodies, which released them from the Hubby Sannin's control. "Sorry, Sarutobi," said Hashirama, "forgive us for troubling you," were Tobirama's final words. "And forgive me, senseis, for not allowing you to rest proper," said Hiruzen as the souls of his predecessors were sealed into him. What happened next would terrify Orochimaru. When Hiruzen grabbed a hold of the Hubby Sannin, he was now able to see the Shinigami. Orochimaru began to panic at the sight of the Shinigami. Using his index and middle fingers of his right hand, Orochimaru was able to call the Kusanagi towards him, much to the surprise of Enma and Zou. He intended to use the weapon to skewer the Sandame. As the Shinigami began to drag out Orochimaru's soul, the blade was about to make contact with Hiruzen. "Die!" they both shouted. Just as the blade was about to pierce his chest, Zou and Enma acted quickly. Zou managed to redirect the weapon while Enma grabbed a hold of the blade. Sadly, this meant the weapon pierced the Sandame's lung but not his heart. Hiruzen coughed up the blood that began to fill his lungs due to the stab. Orochimaru smiled in triumph, believing that it was now his victory. He. "It seems that it is my victory, Sarutobi-sensei," the pale man gloated. Hiruzen could only give a weak smile in return. "You may believe so. However, this jutsu requires the user to sacrifice their life to kill their target." At this, Orochimaru began to panic. If his sensei was willing to kill himself, just what was the jutsu he was caught by? He was feeling himself grow weaker. But not due to lack of chakra. It was something else. What was the apparition that was behind his sensei? Hiruzen was struggling. Not only was he close to his 70s, but he had just taken the souls of the previous Hokage. He was tired. Zou was not going to be of any additional help. The Anbu just went through his own battle and lost an arm. Heck, it was a miracle the captain could remain kneeling after the trials he had been through today. There may be no way for him to slay his traitorous student. He would have to settle for wounding Orochimaru in a way that would protect people from his machinations. As the Shinigami used the caster's physical energy as a medium to draw out the soul of the target, he could not rely on the death god to keep its grip on Orochimaru's soul. Instead, he had it focus on his former student's second most precious body part. He had the Shinigami focus its grasp on Orochimaru's arms before Hiruzen was forced to end the jutsu. This had the Shinigami bring its tanto down, severing the soul of Orochimaru's arms from the rest of his body. The soul of the libs were taken along with Hiruzen's soul, causing his life was fading. Orochimaru howled in pain as the soul of his arms was separated from the rest, turning his arms gray, limp and useless. The two-head member of his guard shouted his master's name. "We need to retreat. Lower the barrier." Following their master's orders, the four lowered the barrier and retrieved their master. Zou was too wounded and tried to pursue the traitorous Sannin. Instead, as his adrenaline died down, he moved to the fallen Sandame, lamenting his failure to protect his leader. "Sarutobi, allow me to remove the blade," said a now free Enma as he shed tears for his fallen friend. Invasion throughout Konoha. Tsunade could easily feel the intrusion of the foreign chakra entering her system. With a roll of her eyes, she effortlessly dispelled the genjutsu. Just as Tsunade felt the foreign chakra, so too did Shizune. With the same ease as Tsunade, Shizune dispelled the genjutsu. Shizune even made sure to free Tauntaun. Even though the small piglet had some ability to use chakra, she didn't have enough control to dispel genjutsu herself. The 2+ piglets stayed in their seats, acting as civilians placed under the genjutsu to maintain their cover. This did not however mean they were oblivious to their surroundings. They noticed the emergence of Suna and Odo shinobi and their attack on the Konoha shinobi and civilians, but that is not where their focus was. It was here when they sat up but not yet stood. Tsunade's attention was drawn to the arena floor, where Naruto was last known to be. When she saw the Suna Jonin attack Naruto, her heart nearly sank through her chest and rage bubbled within her. How dare this person attack Naruto? How dare he strike at one of her two most beloved people? Tsunade immediately stood from her seat and tried to rush forward to protect Naruto, however her path was blocked. She cared not for who tried to get in her way. She struck the opposing shinobi that got in her way in very hard, caving in their chest. Before she could continue forward, another person charged her. This time however, this combatant wasn't alone. He had a partner that went after Shizune. Despite the ease with which they were dispatched, many more were still preventing her from reaching Naruto. She then saw something that made her heart stop. Naruto was struck by a blast of wind that sent him flying. Panic enveloped her whole being to the point where she froze in her movements. If not for Shizune's intervention, she may have died this day too. Since they were already foregoing the pretense of being disguised by openly fighting in the stands, Shizu called out to her master, Tsunade-sama. Snap out of it. Naruto is fine, see. Indeed he was fine, as Shizune pointed out. Tsunade saw Naruto recovering from the wind blast as he was back on his feet. Her relief was short-lived as terror once again enveloped her being as she saw the Suna Jonin once again try to kill Naruto. Luckily his sensei, Kakashi, was there to save him. It was at this point that Tsunade saw red. In her anger she failed to notice Naruto and Sasuke leave the arena in pursuit of Gaara. She rounded harshly in the section of the stands she was in and grabbed onto the seat now in front of her. Using her prodigious strength, she slowly pulled the seat out of the stone it was carved into. The stone strained and cracked from the force she exerted upon it. When she successfully removed the seat from the stone, she quickly rounded in place, once again facing the arena, and threw the seat with all her might at the stationary Suna Jonin that was staring down Kakashi and Genma. Kakashi was staring down 3 Odo shinobi and a Suna Jonin with his genin facing off against 2 Suna genin. He had an idea of what was going on. Suna and Odo were invading Konoha, but why were they after this kid that Naruto has wrapped up in the Kango Fusa? That was another thing. Naruto has the Kango Fusa. Since when did Naruto have the Kango Fusa? How does he have it? Were some of the thoughts running through Kakashi's mind. The foreign shinobi attacked the Konoha contingent. The first to move was the puppeteer, but his genin were not deterred. 2 of the Odo shinobi rushed to face him while the Suna Jonin and the remaining Odo shinobi moved to fight Genma. Kakashi felt a little insulted by the skill being demonstrated by his foes. Since his confrontation with Zabuza in Nami no Kuni, he had put himself through intense training while trying to teach his genin either new skills or refine the skills he deemed they needed work on. Okay, so maybe he only refined skills with Naruto. But what was he supposed to do? He wasn't a teacher in any way, and Naruto has a history of not being the most studious of individuals. If there was another way to teach, he didn't know it. For Sasuke, all he had to do was show Sasuke the hand seals for a jutsu, go over the basics of a nature transformation, and Sasuke managed to decipher the rest on his own. For Sakura, she was eager to learn, especially on an academic level. She took to leaning from books like a fish takes to water. He had begun her training in genjutsu before the exams, but her physical training was something to be desired. This, however, he couldn't fix. A person has to push themselves to train. If you aren't willing to put in the work, you will never see the results you want. For Naruto, he wasn't sure what to do for the blonde. Yugao was the better teacher between the two of them. Why was she not chosen to be a Jonin sensei over him? Was it because he needed more bonds than what he had in Anbu? Was it because he could relate to Sasuke as the loner genius that didn't want friends? If that was the case, then people forgot how he made bonds as a young jonin. It was thanks to Obito that he began to make friends at that age, and Minato-sensei being the kind man he was, as well as Kushina-san, oftentimes forcing him to open up. Sure, Naruto could act like Obito at times. Okay, a lot like Obito, but the other people were missing to allow Sasuke to come out of his shell. There were no adult figures in Sasuke's life to help draw him out, and he doesn't have the same kind of personality as his deceased sensei. So distracted by his thoughts, he didn't notice he had lazily slain the 2 Oto shinobi that he fought against. Something that did catch his eye, however, was the attack the Tsunade used that cut into Genma's flak jacket. It seemed to be a blade made of wind. Before arriving at the arena, he ran into a saddened Yugao and her Anbu squad RO. Worried for her, he had stopped Sasuke so he could talk to her. He had learned from Team RO that Hayate Gecko was killed in his absence by some kind of blade while he was doing his duty. Kakashi knew that this meant that he was killed while on an assignment, and since Hayate was a proctor, that meant that he was killed in Konoha. Yugao had taken the loss of her friend rather hard. In Kakashi's mind, what made it worse was that he was not there to comfort her. Kakashi had placed a comforting hand on the Neko-masked Anbu's shoulder. He wanted to do more, but the Anbu had an image to maintain, and with a genin around it would ruin the visage of the stalwart warrior that could take on any mission. He knew of her friendship with the Tokubetsu Jonin, as they had bonded over the skill of Kenjutsu. Seeing the wind attack that cut like that of a sword, Kakashi grew suspicious of the Tsunade. It wasn't until he saw the palm of his left hand that Kakashi locked onto the Tsunade with an intense fervor. On his left palm was a scar. Now scars are commonplace for individuals of a high rank amongst shinobi, however there was also a discoloration in the right shoulder of the Jonin's flak jacket. That wouldn't be there if the man wasn't in a prior confrontation to today. Genma had been able to easily dispatch the Oto shinobi. The person was cocky, rushing ahead of his ally, believing he was an easy kill. Genma merely spat the senbon in his mouth into the person's eye, killing them instantly. The Tsunade was handling things differently. While he still rushed forward, he was aware of the instant kill weapon in the Tokubetsu Jonin's mouth. Once it was expended, he pushed forward with no haste. Though the projectile was now spent, Genma was far from defenseless. Using the skills he learned under Choza Akamaiki, Choji's father, he paced his resources. What nearly cost him his life was when the Tsunade seemed to attack him with some kind of melee wind attack. The strike cut deep into his flak jacket. It was here that Kakashi joined the fight, causing the Tsunade to retreat. Once his genin had left, Kakashi's demeanor seemed to change. The air around him seemed to be laced with death. "You know," Kakashi said, getting the attention of the two. "A very precious friend of mine lost someone very important to her while I was away." He slowly moved his left hand to his hitai. "It hurt me to know that I wasn't there for her due to me training one of my students. But I was told something rather interesting." Baki stayed silent, wanting to see where the infamous copy nin was going with his speech. "I was informed that her friend was killed by something like that of a blade. I noticed that you have some new features on you that weren't there during the preliminaries, like that discoloration in your flak jacket. So, something must have happened between then and now for you to patch the armor instead of getting a new one." Baki began to curse internally. Of course, someone with Kakashi's record would notice the small things like the repairs to his armor. "You attack one of my cute little genin. Then I find out that you killed a friend to someone precious to me. I think it's time you see why I was feared for so long," stated Kakashi as he uncovered his hidden Sharingan eye. What happened next was not something Genma or Kakashi would have predicted. Kakashi was staring down the Tsunade, prepared to kill the man hurt Yugao when he killed her best friend, only for the man to be taken out by a stone seat from the arena. The seat struck the Tsunade with so much force it pushed the man to the end of the arena as his feet left the ground. He was embedded into the base of the arena wall, the seat still on top of him. With the aid of his Sharingan, Kakashi could see the seat was imbued with Doden chakra, but now a set of questions had arisen. Who threw it? Who could throw it so hard that it carried a Jonin from the near center of the arena to the wall? The Tsunade had collided with the ground that met the wall with a loud crash followed by small pieces of the wall falling on the seat. Kakashi and Genma cautiously made their way over to the downed Tsunade. Kakashi was unable to see the man as there was so much Doton chakra in the seat to keep it solid. It covered his foe. Slowly, the pair moved the seat to see the Tsunade underneath it. There was blood leaking from his mouth, while his chest seemed to be thinner. It appears the chair and subsequent impact collapsed his chest, destroying his lungs and heart. Kakashi looked around the arena to see if he could see the person who threw the seat. Sadly, most of what he could see was a cloud of chakra surrounding the civilians of the stadium that were still under the genjutsu. Sure, there were deeper shades of blue, but many of them were near other deep shades of blue, so he wasn't going to be seeing the thrower from his current position. Genma also seemed to be looking around for the thrower. So, when he was sure that Genma wasn't looking, Kakashi threw a kunai into the man's skull to make sure he was dead, and to be able to tell Yugao he put a kunai into the man that may have killed Hayate. Once Tsunade had seen she struck the Tsunade with the piece of the stands, she looked around to see if Naruto was alright. Panic began to show on her lovely features when she could not find the young blonde. Sensing her master's distress, Shizune put a hand on her shoulder while Taunton leaned against her owner's ankle. "Don't worry Tsunade-sama, he'll be alright. You did train him after all." "Oink," chimed in Taunton. Tsunade took a shaky breath. "I hope you are right, Shizune." The moment was broken by the clash of steel that was ringing out in the stands. Going back to their disguised names, Shizune asked, "Mito-san, do you think we should help fight off the invaders? Or at least provide aid to those who need it?" Once again Tsunade let out a sigh. She would have preferred to stay out of this, but what would Naruto think of her if she did nothing and let people die, even if they were mean to him? He would be disappointed in her, that's what. Rubbing her face with her hand, she nodded to her first apprentice before they moved to aid the wounded. What none of the three noticed due to their own turmoil and discussion was an ominous purple barrier that was on top of the cage booth. Sakura was confused. She was just watching Naruto's match against Gaara, which he won, which she was happy about. Then Sasuke-kun and Kakashi-sensei showed up only for a foreign chakra attempt to place her under a genjutsu. Thankfully she was taught the basics of genjutsu by Kakashi-sensei sometime after their mission to Nami no Kuni. Soon after the genjutsu ceased being casted, chaos broke out across the arena. This only added to her confusion, with fear. She had no ideas what was going on. Why were shinobi fighting in the stands? As she looked around, she saw that Neji and the Jonin-sensei leapt into action. Of the Konoha genin that had made it to the preliminaries of this year's Chunin selection exams, he was the only one that seemed to be fighting. Shikamaru was in the infirmary. Ino and Choji were under the effects of the genjutsu. Rock Lee was too injured to fight, and Tenten didn't seem to have her weapons on her. The bun-haired Kunoichi was forced to use any weapon she could scrounge up from any fallen shinobi. Neji's proficiency with his clan's fighting style, the gentle fist, was proving to be capable against single foes. However, the moment he was faced with a greater number of foes, the young Hyuga began to struggle. Due to smaller stature and the methods the Hyuga often used to train, Neji was struggling to fight his opponents. He was nowhere near as fast on his feet as his teammate Rock Lee, and being shorter than fully grown adults made delivering killing blows difficult. The Jonin had led the charge against the foreign shinobi, going on alert the moment they noticed the genjutsu. While it was not surprising to see Asuma and Guy dive into the fray as they had reputations for being close combat fighters, Guy with his mastery in taijutsu and Asuma with his trench knives, he was able to channel the futon element through. The one that surprised Sakura the most was Kunai. The woman had drawn a kodachi from her red sleeve. "Where did Kunai-sensei get the sword from?" questioned Sakura. The kodachi was a single-edged, straight sword that is nearly 3 feet long. The scabbard an earthen brown while the wrappings around the handle was white. Known to many shinobi of Konoha was that the weapon she was using right now once belonged to her father, who perished during the Kyuubi's assault on Konoha, and that the weapon was stored in a storage seal that was stitched to the inside of her red sleeve, so she was always carry it. Kunai seemed to be rather skilled with her blade as she dispatched foe after foe with clean strikes. Some of the many strikes she unleashed were preceded by catching her foe in one of her many genjutsu. She wasn't able to muse on her observations any longer as an enemy shinobi appeared over her as he stood on the seats in front of her. He had a kunai held in a reverse grip above his head poised to strike Sakura down. Before the knives could strike her, she was saved. She was saved by the red head that Naruto was familiar with as she appeared over her and punched her assailant, launching him somewhere Sakura couldn't see. Sakura was in awe of the woman. Not only was she beautiful but she also appeared to be strong. Can I be strong like her? Thought Sakura to herself. You okay? The woman before her asked. Sakura could only nod her response. Good, the woman continued, help wake the civilians and get them out of here. Instruct them to stay as low to the ground as possible to avoid being a target, the woman ordered. Sakura nodded again in understanding before moving to do what she was told, with her first targets being the other genin. What Sakura didn't notice was that the woman left as soon as she went to wake the other genin. Despite his anger, Neji had noticed the genjutsu being used on him. As a member of the Hyuga clan, even if he is a branch member, he was taught to have mastery over his chakra to allow him to utilize the gentle fist so he could protect his main house masters. One such skill that was taught to each Hyuga is the breaking of genjutsu. After all, it would not do well for a main house member to die simply because the branch member guarding them was placed under a genjutsu with no way to break free. As such, he broke the genjutsu with ease. Due to this, he was privy to the start of a conflict that struck Konoha. However, this did not hold his attention. Instead, he was focused on Naruto and the fact that he had won all his matches with such ease. How is this possible? He was a dead last in his year just as Lee, but they are so much stronger. How can they be this strong? He questioned. We are all controlled by the path that fate puts before us, and fate said they would be failures and never succeed. And yet, these were his thoughts as enemy shinobi attacked the stadium. Due to his thoughts, Neji's anger grew and he needed a method to vent his mounting frustration. Well, a perfect opportunity presented itself. Letting his anger loose, Neji lunged into the fray, letting his anger guide his strikes. The first few that attacked him fell as they underestimated his lethality due to his age. This allowed him to strike them down with ease. Sadly, the next to fight were not as naive as their fallen comrades. They used their superior stature to keep Neji at bay lest he risk taking a fatal blow. Sadly, this could not be circumvented as he was not fast on his feet like his injured teammate Lee. Grr, how am I struggling to beat these fools? I am the prodigy of the Hyuga. These insects should be falling before me. He raged in his mind. Due to his anger, he failed to take into account the reach advantage of his foe and their potential knowledge they may have had by facing a Hyuga previously. While he did manage to defeat 2 more shinobi, he was tiring quickly. This was nothing like when he used to spar against Lee. This was more reminiscent of when Guy-sensei would be Team 9's opponent during spars, only a lot deadlier. Thanks to his anger clouding his senses, he failed to notice a foreign shinobi about to attack him from behind. Before the foreign shinobi could strike him, the woman fell to the ground dead with a kunai in her neck. The sound of a body hitting the floor instantly got Neji's attention. When he turned, he saw Tenten holding weapons that were clearly below the quality she normally carries with her. Neji suspected that she doesn't have her usual shinobi tools and is using whatever she can get her hands on. With a lull in the action, Neji was able to take stock of some of what was going on around him. He noticed that Naruto's kunoichi teammate was about to be struck down by an Oto shinobi. That was until something he wasn't expecting happened. The red-headed woman Naruto had embraced after their match appeared before Sakura and struck the Oto shinobi that was going to slay the Pinkett, launching them away with a single strike. Something he had only ever seen his sensei, Guy, do. However, she appeared to launch him farther than anything he had ever seen Guy perform. This terrified the Hyuga prodigy. Was that what Naruto was going to do to me? Panicked Neji. Tenten on the other hand was seeing stars. She had only ever heard of one person pulling off such a feat, that being Tsunade Senju. And now here was another woman before her who could perform the same feat. Once this was over, Tenten was going to seek this woman out and attempt to become her student. The two could no longer take in the sight of such an experience as the sounds of fighting and the looming threat of being attacked by the invading shinobi stirred them back into action. They quickly made their way to what would be considered between the fighting high-ranking Konoha shinobi so they could act as support, as the last few confrontations have shown they were not able to fight on an equal footing in this environment. As the genjutsu set in, Guy's attention was immediately centered around the safety of his recovering student. In the current situation, the only one of the genin around him that could protect themselves was Neji. The others were either under the effects of the genjutsu or, in the case of Sakura, too new to the world of the shinobi to be used to spontaneous conflicts, or were not armed to be of use like his final student Tenten. However, he could rely on the other jonin to aid Neji, and as long as Tenten found a weapon she would not remain defenseless. After all, no matter the rank of a shinobi, a kunai to a vital spot will still kill. When Lee succumbed to the genjutsu, Guy was quick to catch his student, taking special care to make sure that his right arm and leg stayed straight and did not experience any additional stress as he set him down at the top of the stairs in the spectators' area. Some foreign shinobi thought they could use this as an opening and slay the beautiful blue beast of Konoha. They were wrong. As soon as Lee was placed on the ground, Guy spun to face those who would dare strike him in the back, delivering a hook punch that jammed the faces of both of his attackers together before they were felled by the blow. Once he was sure Lee was safe, Guy leapt into the fray. From what he could tell, the high-ranking shinobi of Konoha within the arena only numbered around 12 shinobi, while the enemy's forces were nearly 4 times that. He and his colleagues have quite the fight on their hands. He could only imagine what it was like beyond the stadium. Asuma and Kunai had drawn their weapons the moment the civilians put their heads down from the genjutsu's influence. That was when the foreign shinobi launched their attack. The Suna and Oto shinobi attacked with kunai in hand, while Kunai drew her kodachi as Asuma drew his trench knives. Asuma was more than willing to clash blades with his foes, while Kunai never allowed her blade to clash with the kunai of the foreign shinobi. Due to the odds against them, every Konoha shinobi aimed for single strike kills. They couldn't allow themselves to be drawn into prolonged engagements, lest they risk their lives and the lives of their comrades. The enemy was also aware of this. They also had another strategy they could employ: pincer attacks. If they could distract the Konoha shinobi, another could strike from an angle they least expected and kill the defenders. Soon enough, Kakashi and Genma would join their fellow Konoha shinobi in the stands. As Kakashi and Guy stood back to back, Guy asked, "I take it you managed to kill the Suna jonin in the arena?" "Yeah, he wasn't all that tough," stated Kakashi. Guy gave a smirk. "Well then, how about a little competition? I bet I can take down more foreign shinobi than you." Hidden beneath his mask, Kakashi had a smirk of his own. "You're on," Kakashi replied. With that, the two moved to aid their comrades. Asuma weaved through all those that challenged him, keeping his elbows tight to his body as he had his hands in front of his face. Using his size to his advantage, Asuma delivered powerful blows that many foolishly tried to block, only to have their weapons cut through and the spikes of his trench knives piercing flesh, while the force of the blows splintered bone. That was not to say he came out unscathed, far from it. As Suna is known for its use of futon jutsu, Asuma was on the receiving end of quite a few, as many enemy shinobi realized it would be bad if he managed to get in close to them. This advantage didn't last long, however, as Asuma was one of the best futon users in the village, so he was able to keep pace with the range game many of the Suna shinobi tried to take advantage of. The Suna shinobi were once again preparing to hammer the Sarutobi with futon jutsu. Asuma would not allow this. As the Suna shinobi launched their futon, Rinkuden Subut, Asuma countered with futon, Supiraru Indo Boru. The Supiraru Indo Boru allowed Asuma to compress the air he was breathing out into a small sphere, which he launched at the Suna shinobi. As soon as the 4 jutsu crossed paths, the Supiraru Indo Boru exploded, cancelling the Rinkuden Subut while knocking the Suna shinobi back. Taking advantage of the downed Suna shinobi, Asuma flipped the trench knife in his right hand so that the blade was pointed up. He then channeled a decent amount of futon chakra through the weapon as he rushed forward, extending its blade to that of a katana, and sliced into the 3 shinobi. One was sliced across the torso, the extended and incredibly sharp blade cutting through the shinobi and flak jacket with no resistance. The second was decapitated, while the third was sliced at the waist. Once they were dead, he stopped channeling the chakra through his trench knife and flipped its orientation once again before attacking more standing foes. Asuma was not the only one to find himself beset upon by multiple foes. As more and more enemy shinobi set upon the defenders, Kunai had been using small genjutsus on those she fought, striking down the ones that resisted while running from the one she could catch. With the aid of his Sharingan, Kakashi could see the tactic that Kunai was using. Kakashi quickly fought his way to his comrades to relay a new plan. They were to corral the enemy around Kunai. This was done with baited retreats and throwing their foes in her general direction. When many were gathered around her, Kunai demonstrated her mastery of genjutsu. The remaining enemy shinobi all found themselves standing on an open lake with clouds above and no land in sight, being unable to move. They were all locked in the battle stances they were in before being caught in the genjutsu, but they were all facing the center of the lake regardless of their orientation prior to being trapped. In the center of the lake was Kunai. She had her eyes closed while her left hand was in a half-ram seal and her right hand, which held her kodachi, was pointed up toward the sky. She suddenly brought her sword down in an outward, diagonal slash, the motion of which caused all the enemy shinobi's necks to be slashed open and their blood escape like a rocket. The pain brought all of them back to reality only to find themselves dead. Once they had cleared out most of the enemy shinobi with Kunai's last attack, Kunai let loose a pulse of chakra that encompassed the stance she was in, which released those still under the genjutsu's influence. As soon as the pulse died down, the civilians all showed signs of grogginess, as if waking from an interrupted sleep. Looking around, Kakashi had noticed the genin coming out from behind the bleachers. It appeared as though Sakura had managed to wake the other genin while they were fighting the foreign shinobi, even going as far as to retrieve Shikamaru from the infirmary. Neji and Tenten also made their presence known, though Lee and Hinata seemed to be laying down as they were not in any condition to fight. They were covered in bruises, cuts and sweat while panting as if they had just run a marathon at Lee's pace. Kunai, Guy, and Asuma gathered near Kakashi. The three took in the appearance of the two combat-ready members of Guy's team. Tenten seemed to pillage a number of utility pouches and a belt from the fallen. It made sense as her skills were centered around throwing weapon into vital spots. They could only hope they were removed from foreign shinobi and not from Konoha shinobi. "All right everyone," spoke Kakashi, getting everyone's attention. "We need to evacuate the civilians to the fallout shelters. But we also need to join in the fighting beyond the stadium. I suspect the situation is far worse out there than in here." The other Jonin nodded in agreement with his deduction. "So how do we wish to divide the genin?" asked Asuma. "There is still another set of civilians that need to be awoken and escorted out, as well as the VIP area holding many wealthy individuals, including the Fire Daimyo," pointed out Kunai. "I'll guard the Fire Daimyo, and by extension the other VIPs, stated Asuma. As a former member of the Guardian Shinobi 12, he should have no problem with my presence." "What of the currently active Guardians?" asked Guy. "They are sure to be around him right now, if not already evacuating him to a safer location. However, their duty is to the Fire Daimyo, so they don't need to protect the visiting lords. For that we need to make sure they aren't caught up in this." The others nodded at this assessment. "All right, so looking at who we have available, who do you want to take with you?" asked Kunai. Soon, however, she noticed someone was missing. "Has anyone seen Shino?" asked a worried Kunai. "I'm sure he's fine," said Asuma. "I have not seen him with my Byakugan as we held the area surrounded by the others," commented Neji. At this, Kunai got worried. Being unaware of her student's condition made her uneasy, but she had to focus on the ongoing invasion and hope he was safe. Asuma thought about who of the available genin would be the best fit for this situation. "I'll take Kiba and Tenten with me. Kiba also brings with him Akamaru, which allows us to be aware of any incoming threats, while Tenten can keep them at a distance so we can keep them safe." The other Jonin nodded at the decision, while Kiba's boisterous attitude seemed to be silenced by the fear of what he had seen of the fighting so far. The clashes he had seen the Jonin get into with the foreign shinobi were quick and resulted in someone dying. Despite the training he had undergone, Kiba had yet to fully bloody his claws on another person. With a gulp he nodded that he would follow Asuma, which Tenten also did. With that the three set off. Here Kakashi turned to the remaining genin. "All right, the rest of you are going to protect the civilians on their way to the fallout shelters. Kunai, You will escort them until you link them up with the Chunin that are leading the evacuation efforts. Once that is done, rejoin the front lines. Kunai nodded at her order. All right, let's move out, Kunai ordered. The genin nodded before they helped up Hinata and Lee so they could begin walking. They got the attention of the waking civilians, telling them that they are going to be evacuated to the shelters and that they need to follow them for their safety. Reluctantly, the citizens of Konoha followed the 4 genin and 1 jonin. They had to travel at a sedated pace to avoid getting seen and because Lee could not travel very quickly due to his injuries. Kakashi and Guy watched the escort group leave with their charges. They will be fine, Guy, said Kakashi. Guy didn't say anything for a while. I know, but I just worry for them. I didn't want any of my students to experience this like we did. Kakashi bowed his head as he responded, I know what you mean. As they turned around, they noticed a large purple rectangle on top of the cage booth. Their eyes widened at what they were seeing. Kakashi, what is that? Questioned Guy. Kakashi was sure what to say. He could see it was a barrier of some sort, but beyond that he had no clue. I don't know, Guy. It seems to be some kind of barrier, but that is all I can tell. Do you think we should go help Hokage-sama? Kakashi shook his head. Sadly, we can't. Even if we go, we have no means of getting through it. We can't go under it without potentially collapsing the roof, so we would only be wasting time when we need to be defending the village. Guy had to concede those points. While Kakashi was known to have some experience in Fuinjutsu, if he believes he can't get through the barrier, then they didn't have a shot. Plus, if they collapse the roof by going through it, they could accidentally kill Hokage-sama. With a sigh, Guy conceded. Okay, I guess we will have to put our faith in Hokage-sama to come out of it alive, commented Guy. With that, they left the arena to push back the invaders. As they escorted the civilians to safety, the genin couldn't help but be terrified of what they were seeing. Off in the distance was a large 3-headed snake that was demolishing everything before it. Explosions went off in the distance as the smoke clouds rose over the many buildings in the area. Fear gripped many of them. They were worried that the fighting would soon reach them and that they would need to fight for their survival. Despite their training, they were still children and showed fear of what may happen to them if they were not quick enough to reach the shelters. After what felt like forever, the group from the arena managed to link up with an escort group of 2 Chunin and 5 genin. I am Kunai Yuhi, jonin. We are coming from the arena that held the Chunin exams. The lead Chunin stepped forward. I am Haru Khan, Chunin. I am one of the squad leaders searching for and directing the injured and civilians to the shelters through the fighting in the village. Kunai nodded to the man. As you can see, we have a rather large group. Can you provide aid to the genin by helping escort this group to the shelters? Asked Kunai. What went unnoticed to all was the entire time that Kunai was talking with this group of Konoha shinobi, she was sending out shortwave chakra pulses to dispel any henge the enemy may be using to deceive them. Luckily, the group before them were indeed Konoha shinobi. With a nod, Haru agreed to aid the group. Okay, everyone listen up, ordered Kunai to the genin. I am leaving to aid the front lines. With that, Haru will take charge of the group. Once you are there, provided aid in the form of additional security for the shelters. Am I understood? The genin all responded with a, hi. With that, Kunai left to aid in the defense of her home. Sitting on a ledge overlooking the Konoha hot springs was a long white-haired man. In his hands was a telescope he was using to peek into the women's side, all the while he was giggling like some kind of pervert. He. There is nothing better than the sight of such beautiful women in the open, he said with a lecherous smile. Suddenly something occurred to him. I wonder what today is. I should probably warn Sarutobi-sensei that the White Snake is planning something against Konoha during the finals. With a shrug, I probably have time to warn him later. For now, my research calls. He cheered. Suddenly a loud crash rang throughout the village of Konoha. Turning to the source, his eyes went wide at what he saw. Coming through the western wall were 3 large brown snakes that were connected at the tail, with each one being almost 60 meters tall. Around their necks were red rope collars along with 3 tomo on their heads. They let out loud hisses as they demolished the walls, killing many civilians and shinobi as it burst through. Recognizing the danger the village was in, as well as the fact the village had been caught flat-footed, the man leapt from his current position and raced toward the walls to help defend the beautiful women in his home. When the snakes had busted through the wall, almost 5,000 Tsunade and Odo shinobi came through as well to aid in attacking Konoha. The defenders were quickly overwhelmed as they were unorganized and had far too many fighters that the shinobi of Konoha had to deal with. For now, all they could do is strike from afar as their home was being invaded. It would take what seemed like an eternity before the white-haired man would arrive at his destination. By the time of his arrival on the scene, the snakes had pushed well into Konoha, destroying much of the village as it pushed to the village center. Upon his arrival to the battle, he leapt high into the air where he promptly summoned a large toad of a cyan color with two katanas with no guard tucked away on its back in an orange sash. The man would call this toad forth from its home, causing it to land on one of the snake's head before introducing himself as Jiraiya to the two remaining snakes. While performing a wild kabuki dance, "Behold you otherworldly creatures. It is I the great Jiraiya, here to banish you from this place. Fear me if you dare," he shouted from atop his mighty toad companion. Unknown to many, the Snake Clan and the Toad Clan have a long-standing rivalry. Before the snakes was the summoner of their rival, and he is said to be either more powerful or equally as powerful as their summoner. From this, the snakes did seem to shake in fear from his presence. The presence of the giant toad and Jiraiya seemed to cause a stop in the fighting. Taking advantage of this, Jiraiya yelled out words of inspiration for the Konoha shinobi. "You lot think you can just invade our home? Well, you have another thing coming. We are shinobi of Konoha. We won't backdown to or anyone. Let's push them back," he bellowed, raising the morale of the Konoha shinobi. The attention Jiraiya had gained from his entrance distracted the advancing Odo and Suna shinobi, which the Konoha contingent were more than happy to take advantage of. With the giant beast taken care of, the other Konoha shinobi could focus on the Suna and Odo forces. The battles became a lot more fierce as the invaders no longer had a large beast to distract the defenders. Suddenly the ground shook violently. Hoping to catch a glimpse of what caused it, it wouldn't be long before he saw a slug he knew all too well, however she was much bigger. "Katsuyu," he shouted in his mind. "When did she return? I thought Tsunade swore off returning to the village," Jiraiya thought, not remembering that Tsunade was the one that sent him flying through the sky a month ago. He didn't have time to dwell on Tsunade being in the village at the moment. For now, he needed to focus on killing the summons before him and driving out the invaders. As he was about to move, he thought to himself, "I wonder where the old man is." Tsunade and Shizu, with Taunton close behind, rushed through the war zone of Konoha, often killing any enemy shinobi that made it past the defenders. As they neared the western wall, they ended up finding many wounded shinobi. "Where are the medics?" asked Tsunade as she took in the scene of the many wounded. "I'm not sure, Tsunade-sama," replied Shizune. Tsunade was greatly disappointed. When she was chief medical officer of Konoha, she had taught the medical corps that even if they were near an active war zone, they needed to perform search and rescue operations to make sure they saved as many lives as possible. It appears as if that has been disregarded since she was in charge. This is yet another reason that she had pushed to have trained medic nin in shinobi squads. Even though the wounded and fallen before her were not in squad formations, how many medic nin could have been in the area to aid Konoha's shinobi? With a heavy sigh, Tsunade and Shizune rushed forward to save the lives of the wounded Konoha shinobi. The first act they did was they performed triage on shinobi around them. Triage is the process of judging the severity of a person's injuries to determine the order of people receiving medical assistance in a crisis or war zone. They discovered that many of the injuries were done by bladed weapons, meaning that they could repair the damage fairly easily. Their main goal was to stabilize as many of the fallen shinobi and civilians so they could receive proper medical care in a formal hospital. Taunton helped out by calling out if she located any wounded. Tsunade or Shizune could not see, either being buried in debris or at an elevated location. The more severe cases that they ran across consisted of perforated lungs, concussions, compound fractures, missing limbs or digits, or ruptured organs. Sadly, for many of these injured shinobi they would need to be marked as unsolvable, as they would not survive in a trip to the Konoha Trauma Center, or there were easier injuries to stabilize. What was worse was that they also ran across many civilians who died due to the onslaught of the Suna and Odo shinobi that ran through the area. Fallen shinobi, foreign and friendly, seemed to be scattered everywhere. On rooftops, the sides of buildings, in the streets and buried in rubble. Meanwhile, the civilians laid scattered throughout the streets and buried under the rubble that surrounded them. There was the possibility of calling upon Katsuyu for aid, but there was no time for that. She would need a dedicated guard detail to ensure her safety for both preparing the ritual circle and to guard her while inside it. Not to mention she would need to be in an area that was flat and would go undisturbed. The best place for this would probably be the Hokage Tower. However, given the current climate of the situation around her, she would have no one but Shizune to aid her, and since it was barely known she was in the village, she may be attacked as an enemy under a henge, delaying her even more. With all the shinobi of Konoha that could aid her at the front lines, she would waste time when she could be aiding the fallen. Since was just the two of them out near the war zone, Tsunade suspected that many would die as a result of the medical corps deficiencies to perform their duties. If Naruto was with them, then his Kage Bunshin could aid in the triage and gathering of the wounded. He could even handle many of the easier cases, allowing Tsunade and Shizune to focus on the more severely injured fallen. Thinking about her little ball of sunshine made her worry for his safety. She must have been wearing her worry on her face as Shizune commented on it. "Do not worry, Tsunade-sama, he'll be alright. You did train him after all." Tsunade let out a weary sigh. She knew Shizune was trying to abate her worries, but she couldn't help it. She had recently just given Naruto her Oji-san's necklace, so he was in danger of dying to its curse. She wouldn't be alright until Naruto came back to her safely and healthy. Suddenly a large rumbling was felt across the village. Shizune and Tsunade acted quickly to cover some of their patients from the crumbling dust. Once the rumbling had ceased, the two stopped what they were doing for their patients and quickly raced up the tallest structure near them, worried about what they may see. What they saw beyond the walls of Konoha stunned them. They saw Katsuyu, but she was far larger than Shizune had ever seen her, while Tsunade had only ever seen her at her true size when she went to Shikatsu Forest. Based on the fact that two of the three active summoners of the slug contract were standing next to each other, the one that called her was the unaccounted for member. "It's Naruto," cheered Shizune. Tsunade was stunned. Never would she believe that someone would manage to summon Katsuyu at her full size. It would seem that Naruto proved her wrong. With a soft smile, "Come on, Shizune," Tsunade said as she turned away from Katsuyu. "We have patients we can't leave unattended if we want them to live to see the recovery teams." Shizune turned to follow her master with a, "Hi Tsunade-sama." To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.